welcome everyone to this. I'm really excited for this one. This AMA with Ramnik Arora, who is head of product at FTX. I'm going to give the embarrassing career overview now. You're gonna cringe a bit, Ramnik, but he's had a great career. It's like quite, I would say, as good as it really gets. He studied at three fantastic institutions: the Indian Institute of Technology in Kanpur, at New York University, at Stanford doing computer science. It really is a three outstanding institutions. He's then worked for three outstanding, I think I can right in saying, institutions as well. Goldman for 3.5 years, Facebook, including on Libra, now DM for 5 years, and as of autumn last year, joining FTX as head of product and part of their meteoric rise. In there as well, we should not forget to add that he's an investor in his own right as well through Toy Ventures, an early stage fund, which have done quite a lot of deals despite only been officially started in January 2020. A reminder on the format I've just said at the start, but I'll repeat it again. I'm going to ask some general questions to get things going. And it's over to all of you to ask whatever the hell you want, as long as it's all polite and respectful. But first of all, Ramnik, thank you very much for being here. We're delighted to have you. And a little easy question to get going, which is, when you were a younger man, a lot of these people here, you're still at university, still studying. Did you think you'd be where you are now? How has that vision changed from what you thought of when you were like 18 to 21?
Oh no. I think like Steve Jobs has this quote that you connect the dots looking backwards, not looking forwards. Yes. And I've not been the kind of person who ends up planning for long periods of time. And frankly, that's been more helpful than I think it should have been. So at 18 or like 20, I thought I'd be a software engineer. That's effectively everyone I knew was going to become a software engineer. That's the plan we had. In the middle, so I thought my career path would be, I would go get a PhD, then effectively move into tech and be a software engineer or like a research scientist, which I did at different points in time in my career though, to be fair. So things will not turn out the way, and things should not turn out the way like you think they would, because the world is changing pretty rapidly. So it did not. I mean, during my time, the internet went up.
Fair enough. One question we always like to ask, as a man at university, how did you spend your time? What were your hobbies? And did any of them stand you in good stead, or do you just regret all of them and think, I was just a 20-year-old?
I played a lot of games. And that was both fortunate and unfortunate. I think I have the friends that we made during university were like absolutely brilliant. Like we are still very tight. We still play the same old games, and they're like boring games. They're like Dota and Age of Empires. But I think the friendship really does matter a lot. And honestly, people have done pretty well since then. Also, ended up spending a fair bit of time on research in university. And it's not research, it's not the actual subject that matters. It is the fact that you can work independently rather than having a curriculum enforcing your actions that matters. So it's the softer skills that end up having a huge impact.
Fair enough. Do you think, I've heard this gaming one a lot, in terms of a lot of crypto-minded individuals and devs are gamers. Do you think less of someone if they're not a gamer these days?
No, not all. Sorry. I think the thing about gamers is you get to spend a lot of time on the computer by yourself. So it's you, the computer, and somehow I think crypto is very, very good for that fact. Like when you're trying a lot of these things, it's not very different from gaming at some level, or trading is not too different. It's a fairly individualistic activity, and that's how you dip your toes into crypto.
Fair enough. And I don't like to skip questions, but I think this one actually is quite pertinent. What do you think of the state of gaming in crypto right now? And are you bullish in the short term, or kind of more worried about what speculation might do to some good games?
So I think there are almost two ways to think about it. One is Web3 games, which are like natively, which start from the blockchain and develop a game on top of it. The other is Web 2 games, so games that we end up playing, and they including aspects of crypto or NFTs into it. Games where speculation is the core concept. I feel like there's just a finite timeline to those games. So if you would not play the game independent of the crypto part, I think there's just like, there's effective, those games, especially like play to earn games, etc., are subsidizing user acquisition by paying out NFTs or other things. That being said, I am very, very bullish on Web 2 games, incorporating Web 3 world. So just to give, like, any game that any of us have played has more users than all of crypto combined. So anything like a Fortnite or even a Dota, or I don't know about Age of Empires, but like reasonably, FIFA, any of these games have tens, if not hundreds of millions of users, which is much more than the entire all Web3 wallets combined. So the big wave, I think, comes from a Web 2 company using the important dynamics that are provided by crypto and incorporating them in their game design, and which feel very, very natural. And thereafter, like, onboarding the users. I think the world gets introduced to crypto. The large part of the world gets introduced to crypto through games and not through Uniswap or something else.
Absolutely. I mean, I take it in FIFA any day of the week. It already has Ultimate Team, and that is a trading card game to begin with. I'm surprised it hasn't happened already.
Yeah, and I think the business model of games needs to sort of change.
Massively.
The business model right now is it's a principal agent model. Like, they sell you skins, or in large part, right? Rather than you're working to get skins, or you're trading to get skins, etc. Which is honestly beneficial to the game. So they're like very good primitives that crypto provides that currently Web 2 games do not have.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully we can unpack that a little bit later. As short aside, everyone, we will, I think, in 5 minutes formally start live questions. So the trick is there's a hand up button. It is, and I think, in reaction. So do prepare your hand up, and you can start putting your hands up now and get in the queue to ask live questions. But let me continue some general kind of questions. We could talk about moves from Goldman to Facebook to FTX. Actually, what I want to talk about particularly is the move from Facebook to FTX, because you were doing a bit of blockchain stuff for a little bit. You obviously had a taste for it. Talk to me about how the move from Facebook to FTX comes about, because this is obviously a big deal.
Yeah. So I spent 5 years at Facebook, and I think after some point in time, you start reevaluating different things in life. And I was at that stage where I was doing that. And there were like some other personal issues which were coming to a close, predominantly immigration issues regarding the US. So I had the freedom to think about things. I spent a little bit of time at the Facebook Libra project, which was, yeah, I think you guys know what that is. So spent a year there. And that's when I first dipped my toes into working in crypto. And effectively what I realized was I became super bullish on crypto, but working in a crypto company within Facebook is still a Facebook company. So the culture wasn't there, versus a few of my friends who had developed over time, who were working in crypto, were telling me about all these amazing things which were happening. So I decided that I wanted to move to a crypto company. And I had some, like, I think there's some cultural things that I looked for in a company. And I started like talking with different people, and I got introduced to Sam, or somebody told me about Sam, sorry. So I LinkedIn messaged him, like a cold LinkedIn, hey, I'm Ramnik, I would love to have a chat. And for some reason, and I don't know exactly why, I thought they were in Berkeley, because Alameda Research was in Berkeley at some point in time. Oh. So I messaged him, and instantly within within 2 minutes, I get a reply back that Sam is free for the next 75 minutes, and he'll hang out at a particular Zoom link. So he sent us a Zoom link.
Wow.
This is 1 p.m. for me. I get on the Zoom link. Turns out to be 4 a.m. for him.
What?
And Sam is working. Yep. So he's in Hong Kong. It's 4 a.m. And he's taking a call because he's trying to hire people. And I think it sort of snowballs from there. within the next 2 hours, between chatting with Sam, some of the other people in the office, by 6 a.m., sorry, we had decided that, yeah, I think we were going to go forward with this. And
that's amazing. That's
and then it took like, yes, that was Sam. And I was at that point in time in my career where I was a little tired of doing like a comfortable 9 to 6 job.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do something more. And also, honestly, crypto will become more formalized. Like, crypto companies will look like any other companies in 5 years' time. But right now, it's a very, very different ethos and something that I resonate with.
Wow.
So
what hours does he do?
So he doesn't have any hours. Like I think he has the unique ability to sleep for 30 minutes, an hour here and there.
Jesus.
So he sleeps like 4 hours in a day, probably, on a normal day, but they're not continuous 4 hours. They're generally pretty like broken up.
What? Is that humanly possible? That's an unbelievable stuff.
Yep, that's true with a lot of people. Like a lot of people, and it's one of those things. Like I did not think that would be possible humanly, but in that culture where everyone's working extremely hard, it's actually fairly. I wouldn't say it's fairly easy to do. Sorry, it's like relatively easier to do, and you'd be surprised how strong any individual is if you're passionate and driven and you really care about what you're doing.
Jesus. And there's no supplements. just motivate crypto. Crypto is the substance.
Crypto is the supplement. And also, like, I think success has an impact on, like, if you're successful at something, I think you end up having the ability to work harder.
Yeah. Outstanding. Okay. I now have a million questions, but I did say I'd only do 15 minutes of my questions, and we have lots of people with their hands up. So let's go to Tahir, who is in the University of Cape Town, to ask our first question. Over to you, Tahir.
Hi. So I wrote my question sort of before this, but it sort of segued nicely. You were speaking about pay to earn sort of NFT projects. And I was wondering, in your opinion, if you thought trading companies like FTX, especially in the sort of derivatives field, would have the appetite to adopt these sort of NFT projects into trading exchanges in the short or medium term.
And what would that look like? Just so that I understand exactly what the question is.
So like, say we structured, I know you said you played Dota, into the type of thing where you could sort of play to earn certain skins or certain weapons or something in those sort of games. And maybe we could, sort of speculate on those independent of whether you play the game or not.
Yes. So I think that's going to happen. There are a number of in-game NFTs, and one way this might end up evolving, and this I could be very wrong, and I'm not very confident in my opinions out here, are you'll have almost two sort of like worlds of games. One will be a completely closed loop system. So imagine I'm a big publisher, right? I'm like EA Sports or Activision Blizzard. I really don't want my content to be listed alongside some random content on OpenSea. So there the trading might be within the walls of EA or Activision or anyone else for that matter. And in that case, you would play the games and you would sort of have an in-game exchange where you could trade with each other. And you could do it without actually having played the game, right? You could just get money in and just speculate on them on their exchange. The other aspect of this possibly is the exchange allows you to sort of have list the NFTs or other assets on third-party platforms. And there it could be pure speculation. It could go either way. I mean, it's likely to go both ways depending on which company it is. They will choose their corresponding path. We do have an NFT exchange. So if you go to ftx.com/NFTs, we do have an NFT exchange. And also, by the way, one quick correction. I think Alameda is the trading side where they take proprietary risk. FTX is not a trading it's an exchange, so we don't take any principal risk. So FTX will allow people to list those NFTs and trade amongst each other. Alameda might decide to buy, like speculate on them, but that's sort of the legal distinction. Just wanted to highlight it.
Awesome. Thanks to hear. Great question. Great. Now moving to our next question, Michael, who's in Encode Academy at the moment. Michael, if I can get my pinning right, I can be faster at pinning. Michael, over to you.
Thanks, Anthony. Thank you, Ramnik, for doing this, by the way. So, okay, so as product at FTX, I was kind of wondering, we're in this weird moment where crypto is starting to hit like mainstream culture, and a lot of people who don't use crypto are getting kind of indoctrinated. SNL is doing NFT skits and things. So I was kind of wondering how you think about users at FTX. I'm assuming they're all crypto native and they're all very familiar with crypto. So how do you think about those really crypto experienced users? But also, how do you think about users who might be future users who aren't as comfortable with crypto just yet?
Yeah. So FTX has found product market fit in the highly engaged crypto users. So not even just like crypto users, I think the people who are spending a lot of time thinking about trading, those are the people who are on FTX right now. And they're the people who care deeply about how an exchange is built, how the matching engine works, how cross-margining works, etc. And those users, absolutely, I think they know exactly what needs to be done. That they're deeply crypto native. The second set of users is the retail users. So the users who are still not in crypto, or my uncle who wants to buy $100 of Bitcoin every month. We have a number of ideas there. And in particular, like I think you've seen a couple of things that FTX has done. Like we started doing endorsements to get our name out. We are providing in the US yield products. We will be offering equities along with crypto. So there's no reason crypto should be treated any differently from the way you think about equities or anything else, right? There's no reason your crypto sits in your FTX account, but your equities sit in your Fidelity account. So the way we think about growing the market is to make crypto almost very, very similar and very, very familiar to everything else. So it should be on the same place and the same interface that you use to buy stocks is the interface that you use to buy crypto. And that is not the end state though. I think that's sort of important. If you remember your crypto journey, there was an evolution where you started by buying Bitcoin and then you moved into other currencies. And then you started looking into DeFi protocols or trading on Uniswap or everything else. So the first step where you obfuscate all the things that make crypto hard is incredibly important. And we're spending a fair bit of time on that stuff. Does that sort of cover your question?
Yeah, it absolutely does. I don't want to hog too much time. I'm interested to hear, sort of how you obfuscate that and how you make the UX easier, but I can happily pass on to somebody else.
So just brief answer on that. Like, I don't think it's any different from like Coinbase, the application obfuscates a lot of that. By being a custodial wallet, you don't have to think about your keys. It's a very, like, the small decisions that go into it, right? Rather than buying 0.1 Bitcoin, now you want to buy $100 of Bitcoin. So the denomination needs to be in the denomination that people are used to. There needs to be insurance that there is no fear that somehow they will get in an exchange hack, they will end up losing money. The interface actually matters a lot, where it's a very clean interface and devoid of a central limit order book that FTX has. Or a lot of the things, and there needs to be some enticing things which make crypto different. So for example, yield in the US. So we offer like 8% yield on Blockfolio users for less than $10,000 of deposits. That is a good reason to take the first step, because if it's exactly like equities, then it will get the amount of attention that a new stock gets, which is minimal. So there needs to be something that gets you over the line and makes you interested. And beyond that, it needs to be simple. People like investing in things that they seem to understand and they find really simple. Any friction in that process has a huge drop off.
Perfect. Great questions, Michael. Well thought out. Right, so we're going to go just a quick aside. I don't know where the raise hand button was, so it is under participants, not reactions. Thank you for the people in chat who corrected me. We're going to go to Euclid from University of Liverpool next. Then George is going to ask some of the written questions, and then we'll keep churning through. So Euclid, over to you, sir.
Hi there. Great to meet you virtually. It's a three-part question. So how do you come up with new product initiatives for the company? And then how do you then decide on the priority of which these products should come first? Because obviously there's limited resources. And then how do you then coordinate with several departments to, market the product and ensure users actually use it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So firstly, let's talk about how do you come up with new product initiatives? A lot of this is just keeping your ears to the ground. And honestly, crypto Twitter helps a lot there. But people are always making requests. This could be a feature request, or this could be a product request. That's one side of things, like how do you actually know? And over time, I think we have a pretty clear roadmap, and all we're doing is moving things around, although we do get surprised time to time. So I'll give you a good example of that. But 4 months ago, or 3 months ago, I wrote a product strategy roadmap in which we just wanted to list down all the things that we need to do and sort of like have a rough prioritization of it. And one of the statements that we wrote in that was, we don't have a clear opinion on NFTs right now. And the market made us change that. Like, we had to have a clear opinion on NFTs because that's what the market was telling us. So it's having a rough plan, and then as things move, meeting the user where they are. On the flip side, like in order to prioritize something, you have to deprioritize something else. And we ended up deprioritizing, for example, options markets in that case. Options, because just there isn't enough volume right now, and our users weren't clamoring for it. So that's, I think, how things end up sort of working. And another thing that ends up happening, which is honestly a superpower, and it's a superpower that you hope that every company has, but I don't think they do. We can move on a dime. And when we decide to move in a particular direction, we will take all resources and sort of put them towards that effort. They could be things like fundraising, they could be things like getting licenses, they could be things, there are many, many things that we're like, once we decide that we want to move in a particular direction, we will move very, very quickly. Another sort of statement, which I think is worth mentioning, a lot of times the blockers are not product or tech. The blockers are regulatory. That is, you're trying to figure out what the regulatory structure is, what the licenses are, or the frameworks are that you can use to offer a product. So something like providing yield. It's a pretty easy product to build. Actually, almost nothing. There's almost no product that we think we will take more than a month to build. And but in order to get the appropriate licenses, that's what makes this a little harder. So in order to come up with in order to actually launch a new product, once we have all the regulatory pieces in place, then we think about, and the tech becomes so unencumbered that you can now start developing. We'll have a pretty, on a weekly basis, we have a call in which we discuss the priorities for the week, and it's fairly fluid. And we'll make a decision that way. Now, I think there was a third part of your question, which is how do you coordinate amongst different departments and how do you actually launch a product? FTX, we work very, very tightly in the sense we're generally physically together. A large number of us are in Hong Kong. And the product launches, there's almost no gap between the product being ready and the product being launched. Luckily for us, a product launch is Sam just tweeting about it. And that is sort of a mechanism for distribution of information. And that brings huge amounts of efficiencies compared to something like at Facebook, we would spend weeks trying to think about the product launch. So moving incredibly quickly is sort of very, very important in crypto. And so you don't want this overhead of communication and coordination. And it's almost like you can, once the product is ready and we spend like a few hours testing it, we will launch this.
Very
Wow,
nice.
that's amazing to hear.
I hope everyone's taking notes. I certainly am. If you don't want to take notes, there will be a transcript of this event produced. So yeah, but you could, great question indeed. Right, George, where are you? You're on my screen somewhere.
I am here.
There you are. Thank you for that. That actually did put you front and center on my screen. George, you want to pick out a couple of the written questions and ask
Sure.
that?
Yes, this one actually follows on quite nicely and is from the president of the Oxford Blockchain Association, Kavan. And he's asked, what was your approach to joining an organization that was growing so rapidly, as you mentioned in that story with Sam trying to hire as fast as they can and making sure that you didn't kind of get washed away with the stream of pace of the company?
Yeah. And I think there's an implicit assumption that I did not get washed away for a little while. And the truthful answer is I struggled a fair bit. So I came from Facebook, and Facebook, we would put 3-year roadmaps in place. We had like meetings about meetings that we were going to have and everything else. And it was supremely uncomfortable moving to a place which was really small, really quick, where decision making was like you took decisions incredibly rapidly, even when you had fair bits of uncertainty. So I did struggle a fair bit for the first few months. I was also in Berkeley, so I didn't quite have the same in-touch experience that I think you have to sort of be in person to sort of learn from the culture. But the other thing which is important is just being nimble, like not having super, or at least having, if you have strong opinions, they need to be weakly held in what the right way to do work is. And if you see something working, don't try to break the system. So anyway, so end up struggling a fair bit, and just had like sort of worked towards one small project that went well. There was compounding effects in which I think compounding on both sides, where the team started trusting me more. I sort of started feeling a little more confident about myself, and sort of compounded from there. But I guess implicitly, I think there's one important thing out here, which is every time you join a new job or any new effort, you should feel uncomfortable. I mean, what is very important out here is that if you don't feel uncomfortable, or if you don't know what you're talking about, or if you don't understand most meetings, then what are the other people doing who've been at that job for like years? Like this is almost, if I walk into a job and I know exactly what needs to be done, and I'm absolutely start crushing it from day one, I'm like, damn, I don't think I'm working with good people. Like they spent a year on this. So anyway, so I think you should be uncomfortable for a few months, and that discomfort should decrease over time, but it is sort of important.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. And Draco's asked, can you talk about why you started Toy Ventures?
Yeah. I think I think I like technology. Being in the Bay Area, everyone sort of has a network of founders that they wish that they could invest in, and people that you just know are absolutely great. So started angel investing a little bit, and these are small checks. Sort of started spending more and more of my time there. Turned out to have decent investments. And again, one of those things, like it took 4 years actually before Toy Ventures actually came into existence. So started in 2016. I think Toy Ventures started, in early 2020. So it started very, very slowly. It started with me investing my own money. Then it became like started talking with like-minded people, started investing with a few friends, and so on and so forth. And then at some point in time, it just became like I had too many IOUs with people, which is like, oh, I invested $10,000 for you, you invested $15,000 for me. And the IRS at some point in time will be like, what the fuck is going on out here? Sorry, what is going on out here? And that I think was at some point in time, we just had to formalize it. It was never the intent. So it's never taken capital from people that we do not know really well. So it's almost a friends and family fund. And just formalizing something that was happening on an ad hoc fashion.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds like it's kind of if something that demanded that it makes sense to kind of just formalize it. It's sort of how Encode Club came about as well. But yeah, I'm going to hand back to Anthony now because I realize we have a lot of live questions to get through. Thank you.
Yeah, amazing questions in chat as well. I'm going to go to Chelsea next. Over to you, Chelsea, to ask whatever you want to ask.
Hi. Okay, so I have a token that's trading about 1 million USD per day. And yet it's only on decentralized exchanges right now. So how would go about bringing that token onto being listed on FTX?
I think there's a pretty elaborate process for it. And it's a pretty standard process. And Chelsea, if you want, I can connect you with the right people at FTX. I don't actually spend any of my time thinking about exact token listings.
Sure. Okay, that would be great. Yeah. Good to connect. Thank you.
Cool. Chelsea, over to Kyle next. To your question, sir.
Oh, thanks for calling on me, Ramnik. I really appreciate you doing this for us. So it was interesting listening to the sleep cycle of one of your colleagues earlier, and it made me think, what kind of routines or repetitive habits do you have built in place intentionally to keep you at the forefront of this industry? I mean, it's such fast pace. I'm a pretty high energy, type A personality. And even I find it mildly hard to stay on top of everything that happens.
Yeah. And Kyle, have you ever had a day in which you worked 20 hours?
Yes.
Ever?
Yes.
And what were the constructs of that? What happened during that time?
I got lost in a project and didn't sleep very much, drank a lot of caffeine, probably didn't eat as many meals as I had originally planned.
Yeah. So I think some of the constructs are almost exactly the same, which is the work is important. The work is engrossing enough. And also, I think a large part of this is the team and the culture and the people around you. I think it's much easier if you're doing this with other people. And even though I know physically you think it's like, and I'm not saying people have to do it for long periods of time. It's like when you got some deadlines and then you'd be surprised how much, and it's also like, I do want to de-emphasize the hours, but I do want to emphasize the fact that in a regular job, there's a lot of work about work. So even though there's a lot of communication overhead and a lot of work about work and a lot of things that you really are you're not moving the ball forward. You're almost like passing sideways or backwards in a lot of cases. If you get rid of all of that in a company and a culture, you'd be amazed at how much faster you can move. And there are times that in order to accelerate the pace, you also have to increase the amount of time you're working. But that's not the important part out here. The important part is, even if you're working 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day, if you're actually working those 8 to 10 hours a day on productive things, it's actually a lot of work. And you can go a long way. You can do much faster than any of your peers. So the culture and the people, I think, are all that matters in order to develop. And success helps a fair bit for the fact that it just motivates you.
Okay, cool. Community. It's a huge one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying like anytime you're looking for a job or a group of people to work with, I think those are some of the ingredients that you should sort of filter for. And candidly, I did not do that for 10 years of my life, of my professional life. So I'm just preaching. And so take it for what you will.
No, definitely. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Carl, I didn't give you a good shout out. You are president of Portland State Blockchain. So sorry for the bad the bad introduction.
That's all right. Bald guy works too. No worries.
Cool. Right. Let's go to Denmark and let's go to Oliver, who will ask the next question, as I try not to accidentally kick Kyle out, but instead replace the pin. So Oliver, your question, please, sir.
Yeah, all good. Hi, Ramnik. Thanks for doing this. I think, first of all, I'd like your take on a little question I have here. Granted, you have the position in an exchange, in a centralized exchange. Maybe your answer is going to be a little bit colored by that, but we'll try anyway. In general, I want to hear your thoughts on the increased amount of centralization a centralized exchange brings towards essentially the gateway to all of these decentralized technologies. We have people like Vitalik, who went on record and has said, I think in 2018, he said he hopes centralized exchanges burn in hell. Yeah, I mean, obviously, there are pros and cons, such as maybe centralized exchanges having more liquidity if you remove the financial incentive from the decentralized exchanges. But again, I think we're going back to the intermediary that maybe blockchain originally sought to get away from, which is we have to now trust an intermediary to do their job right, which may not always pan out in our favor. We saw the MT Gox in 2014, I think it was.
Yep.
And additionally, all of the biggest wallets, if you go to the top 20 wallets, being, I mean, you have two Binance wallets on there on the top 25 Ethereum wallets. You have Kraken, you have Gemini, Huobi, and I think also FTX. So yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to. So again, I'm sort of pretty underconfident in my answer here, but I think the one big difference between centralization and decentralization in other outside of blockchain and crypto exchanges is the fact that there is no decentralized alternative. The existence of a decentralized, sorry, go ahead. I feel like.
Yeah. Well, I was just about to say maybe that's true for the fiat to crypto part, but I don't think maybe that's the entire truth for.
No, sorry. What I meant, I guess I was implying something else. I was like, in most of the real world, there are no decentralized alternatives, and just the existence of, and you can imagine. Sorry. The reason people use centralized exchanges is the fact that right now it's a much better experience. Just period. I don't think there's the day decentralized. So, and the very fact that there's decentralized exchanges out there means that there is some checks on power of centralized exchanges and what you can or cannot do. If, for example, in other industries, and let's just take any industry, I don't know, telecom, there was a decentralized player, or there were decentralized players, alternatives that were available, I think that would be a good forcing function for your telecom provider to give you better service. Just the pure existence of decentralization. So centralized exchanges are only relevant if we can give you a better service than decentralized exchanges. And that is also true with, by the way, there are other places where this has happened. So for example, the operating system that you use, you do have an open source alternative. And there are times in the history where Linux-based systems have actually, like there was a time in, I don't know, the late 2010s and sorry, the late 2000s and the early 2010s, that I was using Ubuntu, because that was the dominant operating system of that time, or like the one that provided me the most flexibility. And now I've gone back to centralized operating systems because they provide me with the most utility or like the best experience. So I don't think one model is definitely better than the other. It is at moments in time, different models might improve differently, and they're not mutually exclusive. I think both need to exist. One is a verticalized experience versus the other is generally not.
Okay, you don't think maybe centralized exchanges, maybe speaking more for your competitors in this case, such as Binance, that they bring a certain amount of a certain degree of gamification maybe to the scene than the decentralized exchanges, maybe incentivizing more sort of gambling, I suppose, rather than relatively not so nefarious investing with leverages up to 125 times.
Yeah.
Which is another, I suppose, another thing that you don't really see in decentralized exchanges. To the same extent, perhaps.
And you'd be surprised how small a part of anyone's business that is, the high leverage. Sorry, I understand your point, but I think your particular example is probably not the right representative example. But that's that's fine. That's fine. That's fine.
I'll take that.
But I understand your point. And I think that's why like regulations sort of come in, like consumer protection and other things come in. Also, there's almost no good reason why decentralized exchanges could not offer that. I mean, there's like a little bit of like chain, and like there's a little bit of like how exactly do you go about building this? But yes, there is something. Sorry, that's absolutely a valid criticism, and I honestly don't have a good answer for you.
I didn't really mean it as much as in the profits that maybe a centralized exchange may acquire from it. I meant more so if it's or if it couldn't be harmful to still relatively. I mean, the crypto scene is already very volatile as it is. I think adding up to 125 times leverage on top of that is maybe playing with fire.
Yeah, I guess the fundamental question you're asking is, if I told you that something was bad for the consumer, but they still wanted it, and they were still like, they still moved in that direction. So at some point in time, the incentive mechanism is broken, or it's like flipped around. And how do you go about that? And I think that's where regulations come into play and consumer protection policies come into play. But I have not thought deeply about that.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet. I think crypto is still a little too young for that.
Yeah,
but that was
absolutely fair criticism.
Those were my questions. No,
Oliver, that was very good. Thank you very much. Cool. Let's keep it going. Håkon, let's in Norway. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thanks. I love the questions about product development earlier, by the way. So I'm gonna kind of continue on that a little bit. I'm wondering about with all the hacks going on in the crypto space, almost everything is getting hacked, it seems like. And you're talking about moving fast and being able to change the projects fast. And I'm wondering, like, how do you keep speed moving forward but still feel safe about what you develop? And I'm also wondering, like, how does that affect your developers' daily work?
Yeah. So when I say move fast, I guess let me caveat it with move fast. There are some things which are absolutely critical, and getting anything wrong there would be catastrophic. So I'll give you examples. Of course, there's the individual node management, which that obviously, if you have any lapse in security, that's horrendous. Another part of this is simple things like an exchange is, amongst other things, a giant accounting software, right? Like we're keeping tabs of everyone up to the 8th decimal. And so you want to make sure like the core infrastructure and the core primitives are very, very well defined. And so once you have the fundamental building blocks and the primitive really well defined, and they have sort of a API, almost explicitly like an API exposed that other people, like most product developers are not touching, that makes it much easier, because you can almost have different levels of security for the core primitive and for UI layers on top of them or the product layers on top of them. And that's sort of the way to think about it. And I think this is true in any sort of, this is not anything new in crypto. I think any company that moves fast, like they will have to define some primitives in which they have to move in a very, very measured fashion. I don't know, SSL certificates and how you actually talk with the front end talks with the back end, or other things like that, are examples in a typical company as well, or database security, etc. So I don't think those fundamentals don't change. I think what you define as a critical primitive sort of expands in crypto.
Very cool. Thank you very much. Let us keep it going. Ashok, over to you. Got my pinning right. There we go. Ashok, you'll go.
Hey, thank you guys so much for hosting this. Obviously, you have a very important job at FTX. My question is a bit more personal. How do you find the balance between the work that you do and just being a person at the end of the day?
Yeah. And my wife would disagree that I have a good work-life balance. So I think that's sort of important. That, but I think what you're implying is, sorry, actually, do you want to expand on your question a little bit?
Yeah, so obviously you have a very important job. How do you have the balance between your job and then like your personal life and the things that like you enjoy doing, and not let your work life, dictate your whole like life, I guess?
Yeah. I haven't done a good job of it as yet. And that is, I think that's mostly true with a lot of people at FTX. And I think, or any, like at any point in time, you're developing anything important, I do think you have an important job. Everyone has an important job relative to themselves. And that is sort of, I think, worth highlighting a fair bit, which is, and there are going to be points in time in your life when your work is much more important than your life, and vice versa. And it's a trade-off that I think hopefully you make consciously, but at times you end up making unconsciously. Right now, me and my wife, we've consciously made the choice of having work be much more important than life, at least in the near term. But from an external viewer standpoint, it is not a balanced work-life balance. It's not balanced work-life, unfortunately. But to us, it seems like that's the trade-off that we chose.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yuri, do you want to go next?
Hello. So I guess my question is about algorithmic trading, which I know is quite popular with FTX customers. So I guess my first question is quite general. What exactly is algorithmic trading? So is it just institutional customers or retail customers kind of deploying their algorithms to work on the exchange? And my second question is a bit more specific. So I think when it comes to crypto exchanges and crypto market as a whole, it's not as liquid as the traditional stock market.
Yep.
And I was reading a lot of examples of how that kind of low liquidity can be manipulated, can be leveraged on to kind of produce short-term market, big volatility in the market. And I guess the famous example is that famous spike in 2013 up to 1,000 for Bitcoin, which allegedly was arranged by this trading bot launched by MT Gox. So apparently they produced kind of money for themselves, and they used some kind of insider information to manipulate the orders and make profits out of it. So basically, there is this danger of having low liquidity and exchanges using it to their own will. especially in, I guess, countries like South Korea, where the legislation is very, very opaque with regards to what happens. We don't really know what happens in South Korean exchanges, and the kimchi reward, all those things are kind of signs of that. Yeah. So how do you value that situation?
Yep. I think that's sort of a hard question, the second part. So answering the first part, algorithmic trading is effectively, if you've got rather than having a subjective judgment, you have an objective algorithm that ends up trading on your behalf. And this could, I think it generally is coupled with connecting in an automated fashion to the exchanges and placing orders from an automated fashion. And generally it's also, it happens generally in conjunction with the fact that you trade very rapid, like you trade a lot. Because if you were doing just like infrequent buys, then you probably are fine doing it manually, etc. So I think theoretically it means like it is that you have an objective algorithm that determines the trade and the sizing, but practically it often ends up being that you're using automated methods and also having low holding periods generally. To an extreme, this could be like market makers, where they're not taking risk positions, they're trying to sort of provide liquidity to the markets. So that's algorithmic trading at large. In terms of market manipulation, so I think, firstly, this is almost nothing to do with crypto markets, and it's a general question. I mean, there's like in the equities and commodities markets, it's happened over and over again that people have cornered the market. There's implicitly been different kinds of market manipulation at short time frames or longer time frames. And there are lots more illiquid assets in equities than there are in crypto. So if you look at the long tail of equity assets, there are penny stocks, right? Penny stocks have basically no liquidity. And so I guess the question is more general, but what it is implying is, how do you control for market manipulation? And the first part of this is, how do you even define market manipulation? So let me give you an example. Let's say I become really, really bullish on an asset, and let's call it the URI token, and I keep buying it, right? I keep on buying the URI token, and let's say I'm incredibly rich, so I can continuously buy it. And there just aren't enough sellers, and the price moves up. My claim would be this is not market manipulation. It is, there's a difference, there's an equilibrium of prices between the buyers and the sellers at any point in time, and the equilibrium just moved up and up because there was an exogenous buyer like me who was very bullish on the URI token. And that's effectively, so that is not market manipulation. Market manipulation is sort of a pretty complex topic, which I don't think I'm fair. So I guess the reason I bring this up is I don't want everything to be taken as market manipulation. It's a very, very narrow definition of what exactly market manipulation is. And I'm not actually confident how exactly do you identify market manipulation, but I can get back to you on that one.
But I guess it's more about interaction of humans and robots. So we know that we don't have enough reaction time to kind of act quickly on any sudden changes. I guess that's all right. But if there is some automated process that can, within seconds analyze the situation, especially if it's given some insider information from the exchange, then it suddenly becomes more.
Wait. I think you slipped in a very important set of words, especially if it's given insider information from exchanges. What do you mean by that?
Well, this is something which happened with Mt. Gox, and so I guess it's a sub question on whether it's possible to discover that that sort of activity. Yeah. So how would you kind of see that? Like, is there any specific metric that you can apply to and see if somebody was misbehaving in that way, or just
yeah. So insider information gets you into jail. It's almost the fastest way to go to jail in most countries. So I think there are pretty severe consequences of trading on insider information in most countries and jurisdictions. At least in the US, it's a short way to go to jail. Or like at least have proceedings against you. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it happens a lot less frequently than I think you think it happens. Like it is basically not irrelevant for day to day. It's not particularly relevant. Now there is something to be said about crypto are generally not considered securities in most jurisdictions, or at least and so there needs to be much more in terms of investor protection and insider trading rules and how you actually govern them. That being said, I think it happens a lot less frequently than you would imagine. There might be information that gets discovered on Discord channels or Telegram or other groups, and people might trade that, but I don't think that has anything to do with algorithmic trading generally.
Cool. I'm going to slightly interrupt there because we have a million questions and we have a deadline that's in 2 minutes. So one last very quick question from Kunal, who is president of blockchain at UCSD, and then we will call this to a nice close. So Kunal, very fast question from you.
Hi. So my question is, how do you deal with the problem of liquidity when, especially when more decentralized platforms have had these problems, and especially in the futures market?
And just say more about liquidity, the fact that most markets are illiquid.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to incentivize market makers to provide liquidity there in a lot of cases. So we have some programs in which we incentivize market makers to make sure that there's at least some sufficient level of liquidity in the different markets. That being said, it is a pretty important problem, and that the more market makers come to a platform and the more people who are willing to take on non-directional risk, they will end up providing liquidity generally. The second thing I think is, for most tokens that people want to trade, it's almost like if people want to trade it, then market makers will start getting filled and they will provide more and more liquidity, because there is some benefit. Market makers make money by providing buying and selling generally from the spread. So if there's no activity, it's also less important to provide liquidity, if that makes sense. So it's the way I think the cause and effect are, the cause is retail customers become interested in buying the particular asset or selling the particular asset, so they are trading, and then the market makers will follow. That being said, we do have some incentives for market makers to provide some level of liquidity on FTX, on the long tail of tokens.
Cool. Thank you very much. I'm going to bring the session to a close because we did say an hour, and we're very lucky to have an hour of Ramnik's time, so I don't want to steal any more. But that was an awesome AMA. I don't think I've taken so many notes of my own during the AMA, so I think that's a sign of a great one. But Ramnik, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Answering everything in such depth and concisely as well, which is a great skill to have. So thank you.
Thank you, guys. This was great, and thank you, Anthony.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Next one is we have Tegan from Edge and Node coming in a few weeks. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Sorry, couldn't answer all the questions. That's what happens when you have a popular AMA, but we'll try and get a bit slicker on the question answering. In the meantime, everyone, much appreciated. Ramnik, thank you again, and see you all.
Thank you. Cheers.